Hello and welcome to another History Hullabaloo with Miss Beth here at Pueblo West Library. Today we're going to be talking all about ancient Egypt, which is a time period that you may have heard of already. And so when you hear of ancient Egypt, you probably think of the giant pyramids and pharaohs and King Tut and Queen Nefertiti. Well, today we're going to be talking about all those things and more. I found a very fascinating book that I want to share with you today that we're going to read through called How to Be an Egyptian Princess. And it is written by Jacqueline Morley and illustrated by Nicholas Hewitson. And it's published by National Geographic. So as we read through this, I'm going to tell you all these interesting little tidbits and facts. I'm going to share with you some photos and show you what the ancient Egyptians ate and dressed like. So as you can see, I'm wearing my costume right now from ancient Egypt, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to that. So let's get started. How to be an Egyptian princess. So let's see. Are you interested in being an Egyptian princess? And this can also be applied to princes too, because it's all about the royal family. So there's lots of interesting facts in here. Says, be prepared for a journey back in time to more than 3,000 years ago. The map below shows your destination in the northeastern corner of Africa. So here's a map of Africa, and right up here is Egypt in the northeastern corner. And notice how the Nile River flows the whole length of the land. So here's another map of Egypt. And this blue line in the center is the Nile River, which was very important to the Egyptians. That was their lifeline. That is where they got all their water from, and it helped them to grow lots and lots of crops, which fed their entire country, and was also a way to travel throughout the country on boats. So it says, a strip on either side of the river is lush and green, while all the rest of the Egypt is desert. This is because the river floods its banks each year, watering the nearby land and coating it with thick, rich black mud. This flood makes the soil fertile so that crops grow plentifully and the country is rich. The wealth is very unevenly distributed, though, and most of it goes to the ruling pharaoh, which was the Egyptians' version of their king. So you can see the photos. Let's see what's next. Your new workplace. Imagine that you woke up in an ancient Egyptian palace. You have servants to wait on you, and when you go out, they follow you, holding tall ostrich feathers to protect you from the fierce Egyptian sun. Because Egypt was in the desert, it was a desert country, so there was a lot of sun and a lot of sand, and it got very, very hot. Inside the palace, the great reception halls are richly decorated with painted scenes from nature. Here, your father, the pharaoh, sees his ministers and guests. Beyond are the smaller rooms in which he lives. You do not enter these unless your father sends for you. So here's a picture of what the royalty might have looked like. It says, in the palace garden, you have a leafy garden with palm trees and a pool. Beyond the wall lies the hot, dusty, and crowded city. So I've pictured what maybe a typical Egyptian palace would have looked like. And you can see it's very large, spread out. And beyond the walls, there's the dusty parts of the city and where everybody else lived. And inside, though, it looks kind of lush and green. There's a central garden here that might have had a pool and palm trees where you could go to relax. And it says, lots of leisure time. You often go to the garden to talk with your mother, the queen. As queens do not normally take an active part in government, she may spend quite a lot of time there. So there's several people that were servants in the palace. And right here we have a steward, a chief of palace guard, the head cook, the treasurer, the keeper of public records, the vizier, which was kind of like the main secretary, and even he has his own fan bearer and his own secretary too. The royal house household. You live in the women's part of the palace with your father's wives, young sons, and daughters. The pharaoh has several wives, though most of his subjects have just one. Your mother is the chief wife, the only one with the title of queen, so you are the most important daughter. Your little brother is heir to the throne, but there are a few wives with older sons. This can cause jealousy and plotting. If anything were to happen to your father, a crafty wife would try to get her son made pharaoh. She might try to marry him to you. A pharaoh is allowed to marry his sister or half-sister. So that's a very interesting fact about ancient Egypt. Not something we do today, but that is something that was part of their culture. And as you can see here, this is some of the furniture that you might find in a royal palace. Their bed, which didn't have a mattress on it. I actually have a picture here of an actual Egyptian bed. So plenty of space for lying down, but didn't look very comfortable. And it was made, this was a royal bed, so it was made out of gold and it had the clawed feet. And here, what do you think this is? It was actually their version of a pillow. They did not have the fluffy pillows that we have today. They actually rested their heads on this bow-shaped wooden structure because they thought that laying your head on the headrest kept it cool from the hot desert air and also kept it elevated above all the creepy, crawly, nasty spiders and scorpions that might be crawling around. And also another fun, interesting fact that I wanted to point out, that the typical pets in an Egyptian household were cats and greyhounds and monkeys. So imagine owning a monkey. That'd be pretty interesting. Clothes for the job. Oh, let's talk about the clothing now. Every day you wear the same thing, a tunic of thin white linen over a body-hugging white sheath dress. For women and young girls, there are also loose dresses. Those who have to do hard work wear a sheath dress by itself, a tunic dress, or just a skirt. Small children often don't wear any clothes at all because it's so hot, and they didn't have a lot of chance to wash their clothes. Though the ladies of the court wear clothes like yours, it will still be easy to see you are a princess. The linen you wear is the finest of all, and it takes a weaver 9 months, which is almost a year, to make enough for one tunic, and you have hundreds of them. So the Egyptians also like to wear very ornate jewelry made out of gold and precious stones, turquoise and amethyst and all other precious stones, and earrings they like to wear. And this beetle here, this blue beetle, was a very sacred symbol to them. It was actually a scarab. So you see that a lot in Egyptian culture. And as you can see, I have my hair done up. So a typical Egyptian royal woman would actually shave her head and wear a black wig over top of her head. And also they wore a lot of dark eye makeup around their eyes. And this was not only for appearances, but also because it helped keep the reflection of the hot, bright sun out of their eyes. So it helped them to see a little bit better. So kind of like their version of sunglasses. So that's when I want to explain my costume here. I have my headdress on that the typical Egyptian woman would wear. And I have my very ornate precious stone jewelry here around my neck and also my earrings. And then I just had the very simple linen tunic. And it had to be very light and airy because of the hot desert sun. The working day. The first duties of the day are to wash and dress, put on your makeup, and visit your mother. The pharaoh might also like to see you before his official day begins. Then it is study time. All the royal daughters are taught together by a tutor. In the afternoon, there is usually a ceremony to attend to welcome an ambassador or to present a new governor with his seal of office. These events often end with an evening feast. The best evenings are those that the pharaoh spends with his favorite wife and children, and that includes you. So it says the role of a princess. If you had been the eldest prince, your tutors would be training you to govern. But princesses are not expected to rule. Attending ceremonial events like the one above is the only part you play in matters of state. Behaving like a goddess. When your father gives you a banquet, you eat with the guests. Always be dignified, which means have lots of manners and be very polite. You must act like the daughter of a god, because all pharaohs were considered to be gods back then, which means they were considered to be sacred and holy and above your average man. So they were treated with lots and lots of respect. And also, how Egyptians took baths. It says, every morning you take a shower. You kneel in a trough and have water poured over top of your head. Everyone washes daily, though there is no plumbing. Water is fetched from a well or the Nile River. The ancient Egyptians are very fussy about smelling clean and sweet. On special occasions, you shave every hair off of your body, and you rub yourself all over with scented oil, and some people chew honey pills to sweeten their breath. So they were very particular about being clean and sweet smelling, and just looking very, very prim and proper. Okay, royal feasts, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, says, an Egyptian princess must obey the rules of proper behavior, always show respect and be obedient. It is believed that the gods once ruled on earth, setting the ways for people to live, so you must not criticize the way things are done. If an elder tells you to do something, do not argue. Never give opinions unless asked. And despite these rules, ancient Egyptians enjoy life. They celebrate and often joke about their betters behind their backs. So, here they are having a feast. You can see them eating all sorts of good foods. And despite it being a desert nation, they had a lot of interesting fruits and vegetables that they ate. So a typical feast in a royal household, I have some examples here. Let me bring them over. This is what the typical Egyptian diet would have looked like. So right here, we have, so these are some of the vegetables that they would have grown. Onions and celery and cucumbers, also lettuce and leeks and garlic and scallions. They would have had a lot of dried fruit. These are raisins right here, which are dried grapes. But they also ate dried figs and dates and had fresh grapes and figs as well. They would have made bread out of a wheat called emmo, or farro is what we call it today, farro wheat, or emmer wheat and farro wheat, and they would have mixed it with a little bit of water and yeast and baked it in a clay mold in a stone oven. And they would have made it into all sorts of fancy shapes like animals and other things. I just have a simple square here. And then a lot of their porridges and their other flours are made out of barley, which I have right here. And they also ate a lot of beans and lentils and peas and eggs. They had a lot of chickens. And then for the very rich and noble, we have honey as a sweetener because they didn't have sugar. They usually used honey, and they would pour it over their rolls and their cakes to make them sweet, and sometimes pour it in their drinks. And then also butter and cheese, which were reserved for the most noble and rich families. That's something that they enjoyed. And they also used spices such as cumin and dill and coriander and mustard and thyme, marjoram, cinnamon. And another very fun fact that I found was that the Egyptians were the first people to eat marshmallows. So they harvested mallow plants from the marshy regions alongside the Nile. And so it actually came from a plant. And they would boil this down, boil some of the roots down after pounding them out into a pulp, and then mix them with honey until it was thick. And once thickened and cooled, it can be strained and then eaten. And that was the ancient Egyptian form of marshmallows, much like we have today. All right, so let's move our feast out of the way. During feasts, they would also have lots of entertainment like music and dancing, which you can see some of the pictures here. And feasting and food were so important to the Egyptians that they had a lot of artwork that dealt with it in some of the royal tombs of the pharaohs. You can see some right here of food being delivered to the gods and different types of food here. And even what the royal bakery looked like during the time of King Ramses. So you can see them mixing their flour and their water, baking it in the oven. It took a lot of people to do this work because they were baking a lot at one time. So these are actual paintings and artwork from some of the royal Egyptian tombs. All right, let's see what we have next. Oh, another interesting fact. Getting along without money. The Egyptians didn't have money, actually. So they used what we call a barter system, which is they traded what they had for things that they needed. For example, 3 fresh fish in a wooden bowl for a pair of sandals. So if you needed a pair of sandals, you could go to the market or your neighbor and say, hey, I have 3 fish in a wooden bowl. Would you be able to spare a pair of sandals for me? And if they thought it was a good trade, then there you go. But the royal family, the pharaoh and his wives and daughters and sons, pretty much owned everything in Egypt. So they had anything they wanted, and they could get anything they wanted. So they had lots of jewelry and access to a lot of things. Opportunities for travel. I want to show you what an Egyptian barge or boat looked like when they would float down the Nile. Looks very different from our ships and boats nowadays. It was very long and narrow. And it had a small canopy right here to block out the sun. And they would also have space for even entertainers on the boats, because they love their music. Okay, opportunities for travel. The pharaoh often leaves his capital, Memphis, which was the capital city of Egypt, to check how distant parts of his kingdom are being run. He will travel along the Nile. It is best to travel by river, as all important places are near it. Nobody lives far from the river. Beyond its fertile banks, there is nothing but desert. Important members of the pharaoh's family and court go with him. He takes his favorite wife and daughter, so you may enjoy some river trips. So up and down the Nile River they would travel. More pictures of their really cool looking boats. And this right here down in the corner is a picture of an Egyptian well, how they would get water out of the Nile. And it was kind of like a lever with a bucket on the end of it, and they would have a weight attached to the other end of the lever. And they would dip the bucket into the water, and then the weight would pull it back up. And so that's how they got water from the river in an easy way. At the temple. Noble ladies of ancient Egypt also serve as priestesses in the temples. You do not have many duties, but it is a great honor to perform them. Egypt is full of temples, at least one in each town, and huge temples in the cities. Ancient Egyptians are very religious. They honor the gods on holy days and include them in all decisions they make every day. So temples are very important buildings in the cities, and they were huge, ornate buildings that had lots of neat artwork on them. And here are some of the gods and goddesses that the Egyptians worshipped. We have Hathor and Horus and Isis, Geb and Osiris, Atum, Khons, Mat, and they each had different roles in the Egyptian religion, like the goddess and the god of the sun, the god of the dead. So that these gods seem fierce and strange, but to the ancient Egyptians, they look stern and dignified. They display their special qualities in their appearance. Hathor is a loving goddess. She has the head of a cow because she overflows with the milk of kindness. Horus has a falcon's head. He is seen as the eye of the sun, like the falcon. And music for the gods. They would often perform musical songs in worship of their gods. And so I have a picture of an actual Egyptian instrument right here called a sistrum. And it was kind of like an ancient tambourine almost, or bells. You would shake it and these little metal discs on the rods in the center would go back and forth and clang together and make noise. And they also had things like flutes and stringed instruments too. In sickness and in health, life in ancient Egypt is not all sunshine and luxury. For example, desert sandstorms blow sand everywhere, even inside your palace. The sand in your food wears your teeth down and inflames your eyes and dries your throat. People say that the desert is the home of demons and blame them for their bad luck. This can be worrying if you become seriously ill. Your doctor will put his trust in amulets and spells to drive the evil spirits away. So they didn't have, they were very advanced in their medical technology and understanding, but they didn't understand germs quite like the way we do now and viruses. So anything that they didn't really know the cure for, they would decide that it was an evil spirit that was attacking the person, and they would try to get rid of that evil spirit through amulets such as this, and prayer and services. But there was also a lot of practical things that you had to worry about back then, such as scorpions and alligators and locusts, and also the sand that they mentioned did damage to your eyes and your mouth and your lungs even. Living in a desert was not easy. Becoming a queen. As the royal daughter, you are likely to be the next pharaoh's queen. You might marry your brother. The god Osiris married his sister Isis, so it is a godlike act for a pharaoh to marry his sister. And not all pharaohs and their subjects copy the customs of the gods. When you are queen, you will hold court and attend long public ceremonies at the pharaoh's side. You must also be tactful, which means courteous and polite, with the other wives. And here is the princess traveling throughout the city. She's actually carried by all of the servants. And the fan bearer is keeping her cool. It says, could you land the top job? Could you be an Egyptian princess, do you think? Now that you know a little bit about what it entails? Your chances of being pharaoh are slim. Even if a pharaoh has no sons, a daughter is not in line for the throne. A few queens have reigned bravely in troubled times when there was no firm heir. One queen, whom you may have heard of, Hatshepsut, seized the throne in 1503 BC when her husband died and the next pharaoh was still a child. Hatshepsut refused to step down when he grew up, and she ruled as pharaoh for more than 20 years until her death. So she was actually a very famous female pharaoh, a queen back in Egypt, who ruled for more than 20 years. And actually, the Sphinx, which is something you may have heard of, it's the huge statue alongside the pyramids. It has a cat-like body, and then the face on the Sphinx is supposed to be Hatshepsut. It says, the mark of a pharaoh, Hatshepsut, is shown as a sphinx wearing a false beard, which is one of the emblems of a pharaoh. Long-term prospects. So the Egyptians believed in what we call the afterlife, which means once their body died, they thought they would travel to a new world and live a life there. But in order to get there and to live successfully in that afterlife, they had to take everything that they might need with them. So that is what this picture I have right here. This is actually taken from King Tut's tomb when it was discovered back in the 1920s. This is a lot of the stuff that was in his tomb. Most of it is things that they thought he might need in the afterlife. So you can see some boxes, and there's some food over here, and containers, and this long bed here. Everything that he might need in the afterlife. So this is some of the stuff that King Tut had in his tomb. And our book says, if the proper preparations have been made, you will live forever in the land of the dead. a place ruled by the god Osiris. Like Egypt, it has a river and golden cornfields, but without any work or worry. You will not get there, though, unless your work or your ka is kept alive. Everyone has a ka. It is a spirit that inhabits your body, and when you die, your body must be specially preserved so that it will last forever. It will be sealed in your tomb to provide a home for your ka. And all nobility back then in ancient Egypt they were embalmed and turned into mummies. They were preserved and then put in these giant coffins called sarcophagi, and they were carved to look like the person that was lying within. And there you can see the pharaoh's beard that we just mentioned. And then their body was transferred to a large tomb, such as the pyramids. So that is our book. Do you think you have what it takes to be part of the Egyptian royal family? It's a lot of hard work, but it sounds like also a lot of fun in some ways. And they certainly had some good food to eat. There's one more thing I'd like to show you before we wrap up, and that is how to make your very own Egyptian papyrus. So nowadays we have paper that we write on, and you can easily get it at the store, very cheap. And use it in school, at home, for printing, for coloring. Well, the Egyptians didn't have that. They had what we call papyrus, which was made out of a plant, actually, that they harvested from alongside the Nile. And it was kind of like a tube, like bamboo almost, and they would slice it up and then pound it out and make it into strips. And then they would glue the strips together, and it would turn into something sturdy and stable that they could write on like this. So let me show you how we can make it nowadays. Very simple ingredients that you might have lying around the house. So I took just a paper bag, a regular old lunch bag, and cut it into strips like this. And I have my newspaper laid down here to make for easy cleanup. And then I have a paper towel laid over top of it, which is going to form the bottom of your papyrus. And I made a simple mixture right here of 1/2 cup water and 1/2 cup of glue, just regular Elmer's glue. And I stirred it together until it's a very runny consistency. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper strips and then I'm going to dip them into the glue here, glue mixture. This is where it gets kind of messy, but also fun. And then you're going to scrape off the extra glue. And then you're just going to start laying the strips next to each other. And you want to make sure that the edges are kind of overlapped so that they connect to each other. Don't have any empty spaces in between. So we're going to lay another one down right there. We'll do another one. I actually had a lot of fun when I was doing this craft. It's fun to get messy a little once in a while, especially when you get something neat and cool out of it. All right, we'll do one more going this way, and then we'll have to layer some strips of paper going the other way to make it extra sturdy. So here's my last one. All right. Now we're going to go the other way. So dip this one in. And what I mean by going the other way is we're just going to make it at a right angle or perpendicular to the ones I just laid down. And then we're going to cover all those down to the very bottom. So it's going to be a double layered, extra sturdy papyrus sheet. Just do the same thing, overlap the edges so that they're connecting. And I'll do one more. And as you can see, this is really wet right now. So this is going to require a little bit of patience because it's going to take maybe up to a day or two to dry. I think mine took maybe a day and a half to get completely dry. But once it does, you can peel off the newspaper. The paper towel probably won't come off, but that's your backing. So, and then when it's all dry, you have something sturdy like this. See, it's really sturdy. And I was even able to write on it with the ancient Egyptian written language, which was called hieroglyphs, and it was actually a bunch of symbols and pictures of animals and different things in life that symbolized words, and that was their form of writing. So I have a bird here, and then some curved objects. So you can write on it with chalk or crayon or colored pencils, really whatever you want. And the Egyptians loved a lot of bright colors, so get creative with it and get artsy with a lot of colors. So now that my fingers are all messy and gluey, I think that's going to be the end of our project here today and learning about ancient Egypt. I hope you had a lot of fun. We got to talk about food and clothing and what it was like to be a royal Egyptian 3,000 years ago. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time for another History Hullabaloo. Have a great day. Bye.